For the legendary figure in country music, George, not everything about Strait music is the same. A prosperous country music artist was on the brink of ending his musical career, so he could concentrate on Norma Strait. His wife, Norma, has been instrumental in George's profession and frequently serves as the silent force for serene and logical in his work. She has always supported him, even showing up in his song Código music video. But now George must be present for Norma, as the reverberations of a common loss George Strait weighs on Norma's heart. When he was in high school, he met his wife. School, but they hadn't yet spoken. Saw one another, but that was all. George might have been holding back because he was too busy to dedicate himself to his father. As a junior, John Byron was a Strait senior, math teacher at a high school, who had a 200-acre cow ranch outside of the large George's Weekend in Wells, Texas. Was typically busy working on during the summer. George worked on a cattle ranch. Daily on the ranch, and he found it enjoyable. But one day he asked Norma to go out with him. George, her date, thought she was really attractive and even called her attractive at that time. He didn't see her again after that one date. George had long since turned into sidetracked by life's routines, but did he refuse for any other reason? To pledge his loyalty to Norma while he was his parents separated in the 4th grade, and as a result, his family divided his penny. His sister moved in with him and his brother John, while his mother Buddy Jr. remained with his dad, and his father, his brother, and his friend kept up his farm labor. But George believed that there was a gap in his life without seeing Norma again. Still thinking about her, he went to her once more, and they started dating while they were enrolled in Peschel High School. Both of them went to Speaking of High. It wasn't just romance in school that George was chasing whatever he was passionate about. Enjoying life while working on the ranch as a cowboy roper is another name for George. Appreciated the music that captured his attention. He desired to pursue a career in music. Unlike the fabled character, he is a country music artist at the moment. Rock was George's first musical genre, and roll like a lot of young people at the period when George was likewise enmeshed in the rock frenzy of the British invasion era. While attending Peel High School, he became a Drew in the musical group, the Stoics, the Beatles, as their source of inspiration and other British performers. But the British rock Drew grew during the invasion era. Followership. George's selection particular genre was intriguing in light of how popular was country music in Texas. Was so dissimilar to country music that so much that he didn't hear it on Farmer's Report on radio preference. Rather, he went wherever the rock, and he was led by roll music and gave performances for various other groupings. But something altered. George at last paid attention to taking in live country music performances, and their performance resulted in him going to more live country music performances. Indicating his passion in music changed, he became enamored with country music, and consistently started to hear the such as Hank Thompson and Frank Sinatra, George Jones, Merle Haggard, and Lefty Frizzle, Hank Williams, and Bob Wills at last. With the genre selection at hand, George appeared on the path to life as a professional performer, yet he lacked what he required. But following the first relationship he had, George was prepared to take Norma with him. Taking things farther, and what he didn't follow may be regarded as romantic, simply insane, or even he eloped with Norma. A little bit of both to Mexico following high school graduating and married there on December 4, 1971. They were in opposition to George, and the world adored the odds. Following their marriage, George and Norma came back to Peel and attended church. Their union was something that appeared to be taken directly from a romance book. But the catastrophe that followed was something that even the hardiest, the writer wouldn't want to write the loss that would shatter George and Norma was approaching. But they had fun at the moment. George's devotion for their serene existence wasn't limited to the country music of his wife. He liked America, and he adored cowboy roping. When it was time for him to join the 1971, he did so eagerly and fearlessly. To serve and contribute to the United States, became a Strait soldier, and assigned to Hawaii's Sheffield Barracks. Following his posting to Hawaii, Norma joined him, and they started living together as then, on October 6th, a couple. They became a family in 1972 after his wife gave birth to Jennifer, their daughter. Everything George had ever desired was suddenly his. Not all of it, but he quickly repaired something. George continued to be passionate about music, and when the chance arose, for he seized the chance to perform, he spent the entire evening trying out for a band of country musicians sponsored by the Army. I joined the band and started talking country, played off the bass as well as on it. George and Norma had a happy life. They were unprepared for the calamity It hung over George's departure from the Army in 1975, became a corporal, and proceeded right away to studying agriculture at Texas State University. Culture. The decision wasn't shocking, given that he had been employed on a ranch for all his life. But what prevented him from pursuing music? Rather, George did not pursue a musical education. At Texas State, he never left it alone. George University saw a flyer that Stony Ridge, a country band, posted. They were looking for a new vocalist for the college. Strait auditioned right away and joined them, and he even rose to fame. Band member, as he modified their name after the band's ace. The band played largely in Texas, bars and honky SS, and shortly after, they started to gain traction in the area and open for national initiatives like the Texas Playboys and Dozing off at the wheel as they became independent from their regional fame. Label D Record, which had its headquarters in Houston, gave the group the opportunity to record singles, which was fantastic. Chance for them, and wrote Strait the tunes. But, regrettably, the songs wasn't hitting Strait and was becoming. Norma continued despite her frustration. Motivating him to earn a living, Strait kept working on the day at his father's cattle ranch to generate the money his family required with the music that they recorded using Dord. George lost ties to he and his band are still in the recording industry. Kept performing with incredible. Their enthusiasm brought them to Irv. Who was it that George befriended? Who was in charge of one of the bars that Woy had worked for George's band while they performed? Woolsey started working with major company MCA Records to converse with those he knew concerning George and his band. These individuals arrived, and George and his band were adored. Yet they weren't convinced by his style of music. What would appeal to a broader market? Was his rejection due to this style? Continued to observe to learn how George felt. Heartbroken, but now wasn't the moment for him. He got up and decided to give up. George started to try harder and went to Nashville as trying to succeed, but he went from one and nothing came for him. Studio to a different one and was turned down by all of them were disappointments. Eroded his self-confidence, and quickly, after George finished, he had to provide for his spouse, kids, and if music would not be how he would act. Something additional between the setbacks throughout his musical career. George received a job offer designing livestock. It was a common job working in pens for a ranch. He had one, though not one he was excited about. George informed the group that he was intending to give up and enjoy his aspirations, was supposed to die as a famous musician. Norma was unhappy since she was aware of her. The hubby lacked enthusiasm for creating. She didn't want to be in cattle enclosures. He will stop playing music because she requested a heart-to-heart with him. Conversation and requested that he give music. George didn't shoot for another year. He loved Norma, and he didn't want to break her heart. He agreed, as it would be too much to do it to her. To perform music for an additional year, it was fortunate for him to listen to Norma, since MCA signed George in 1981 to a recording agreement, although there was a catch, and George just had one opportunity. If his song was successful, they might consider recording an album that George had to take a single chance. George, his band, and himself as a backup. Unwound, his debut single, was published for MCA Recordings, and it performed incredibly well. It peaked at number 6 on the Hot Country Tunes on billboards, and that was sufficient for an album. George issued his first straight country album, and similar that he emerged as the most attractive new item on the block. His sound was taken into a welcome diversion from the pop impacted the dominant country music genre. The music business during George's sound was thought to be the new. The sound of traditional country complemented his genuine cowboy image and received recognition for coming back. The origins of country music. From that, George cemented himself as one with the album, among the top performers in the field. Although even the most brilliant stars lowered, the success of his debut single and album weren't the sole positive aspects that occurred to George and his wife in 1981. Additionally, Norma gave birth to their second child. George Bubba Strait Jr., his son, and George had further success in 1982, hitting his career's first #1 hit with the tune Naively. He managed to integrate all of his interests, what we refer to as the legendary, into one. Eddie Rabbitt, a country music artist, typically took center stage at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, but he became ill in 1983, and this is what George had to do in his place. Signaled yet another development in George's career, and whatever he touched appeared to change to gold. And he even ran 5 projects that achieved the top spot place on a billboard between 1983 and 1984. From being prepared to give up music in 1981, the Country Music Award went to George for the leading male vocalist project, staying at the top of the rankings as his career progressed. His spouse persisted in provide the home front stability, due of her husband's impending absence. For the most part, Norma decided to give up a career in order to be always there with the kids. She was a devoted spouse to her husband and mother, who was protective of her children, listened to her requirements, family, and they prospered as a result of her. Even the Country Music Award went to Strait. Once more for the leading male vocalist, it was a remarkable triumph for him. But it was, if he could, he would give up something to undo the catastrophe that destroyed his. Norma did her best to help her husband and him, was able to monitor her kids as Jessica, her first kid, grew up, and Norma and her many friends when she was 13. Her spouse attempted to keep an eye on who she friends, and they enjoyed the people she connected with, so when she desired to leave, her parents didn't understand why she was out in 1986. They didn't let her go out with her. When they were 13, friends believed their daughter needs to experience a certain amount of, unfortunately, independence that evening. In the final time they would be able to observe their daughter riding while she was alive, in the vehicle's front seat where she was in and wasn't when she left. Gregory, the driver, is taking care of her seatbelts. Wilson Allen was speeding excessively when he reached a bend where he was unable to maneuver the turn correctly since he was moving too fast. The vehicle overturned, and because of Jennifer didn't have her seatbelt on, was thrown out of the vehicle in part. When the vehicle struck her side, it crushed, and the driver immediately took her life. Was accused of a misdemeanor of Class A for homicide by vehicle. Although the act had been completed, Jennifer would not be attending. Her incident brought to light the significance of paying attention and following instructions. Her event also demonstrated traffic laws. The weak spot in George's and his husband, the two of them were broken. Norma's heart was entirely very devastated, and George had. In order to declare anything, he chose to say, he said farewell to all of the interviews he types of public discourse that could cause him to discuss the effects of the impact of his daughter's passing on him, and Norma believed that she had failed in her duty, and she required a method to cope with her death. Thus, in 1986, the Jennifer was founded by Norma and George. Lind Strait Foundation via the Norma was hoping to find some normally and avoid what transpired to Jennifer from occurring to another children that the charity sought to offer for kids without, as well as Norma regarded her co-foundership with seriousness as devastating as her daughter's passing. Did she still need to support her son Bubba, who was just around age 5? She continued to provide care at the time of her son while George persisted in perform. He didn't stop working on his obligations as a musician. He was unable to take a. He was shaken by the loss, and his method for avoiding hopelessness was to sing while his child's passing reverberated. George poured his sorrows in his mind into his stage appearances and music. He had a streak of 11 consecutive #1 songs that began in 1986 and concluded in 1989, saw him have multiple #1 hits. Would eventually witness him breach the record set by the famous Conway Twitty for most hits at the top of Billboard's Hot. He would also rise to the top of the country songs list. The person with the most records, one song by a performer on every chart in whatever the genre. The renowned performers who dominate run-of-number songs witnessed his nomination for the the Academy of Country Music Awards. At the Music Awards, he'd be the most. George, you are nominated for those 2 awards. Then took up the Country Music Award, 1989 and 1990 Entertainer of the Year. Additionally, he was named the ACM Entertainer of the 1990, was the year prior to receiving another CMA 2013 award, while also taking home another ACM 2014's Entertainer of the Year. If those 2 awards were won, currently the majority of country musicians. At the present, George is just superior to his classmates. Regarding country music, despite his tours were renowned and similar to his created a new traditional nation. He also developed the festival music style tours that brought him enormous wealth of funds, but it wasn't only the funds that George received, and he also raised the cowboy rides as a renowned scene, away tour at Arlington's AT&T Stadium. In June 2014, Texas drew a crowd of 14,792 individuals and assisted him in developing the biggest indoor performance record in. This was not the largest North American. He would attract a large crowd in 2024, setting the record for the biggest concert with tickets in the United States. For one act, history with more than 110,000 people at college's Kyle Field Station, Texas, is coming to observe him perform. But this audience was insignificant, like the audience he's had to play for at the Rodeo Houston Livestock Show. He was a significant musician and figure. He earned almost $20 for the rodeo. Performances there for more than. George has dazzlingly won over 1 million fans in festivals and concerts, but none of his performances in two ways as a musician might contrast the quantity of George has sold records thus far. Sold more than 20 million records globally. Consequently, he is among the most popular and top-selling music. He has 33 distinct albums as an artist that have gold or platinum certification, and has even been announced as the 12th music artist, with the best album sales in the U.S., selling more than 70 million documents in the U.S. His accomplishments have secured him a position in the forthcoming Hollywood Walk of Fame in 2025. You can only speculate what took place in a fame class so long prior to his induction that, despite the fact that George and his spouse bears the reverberation of the suffering of the death of their daughter, is something they don't discuss. The one occasion when they discussed her passing with George and Norma went in a different route. Instead of regret, that they expressed gratitude for spending 13 years with her, and this demonstrated the couple's mental toughness. Try to find occasions to express gratitude, even in awful circumstances.